There's some crazy kung fu, whatever this Tong monster is. A lot of fake dubbing,
The Chosen One is here to help us. I like him.
and a kung fu cow, and a one melon lady.
Okay.
Hello, Popcorn Recap here. Today we'll talk about a 2002 action comedy movie called Kung Pao Enter the Fist. Before we start, be sure to like the video, drop a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you dig the summary. The movie begins with a family living in a hut in the middle of nowhere. It seems they are afraid and planning to leave their home. They plan to hide their new baby because someone wants to kill him. Unfortunately, Master Payne and his crew arrive and kill everyone except baby Steve. Master Payne approaches baby Steve and his disciple confirms he's the chosen one. Realizing the threat, Master Payne takes out his dagger and decides to end the baby's life. Baby Steve blocks Master Payne's dagger and fights him off. He overwhelms them all and makes the assassins flee in terror. Even Master Payne struggles to keep baby Steve at bay and receives a baby shower. Man, I wish I was this combat ready when I was born. Master Payne decides to burn the house and baby Steve with it. Thanks to his power, baby Steve escapes a fiery death. He crawls to look for safety but eventually rolls down a cliff. A woman finds Steve rolling down the cliff. After admiring his cuteness, she throws him down the cliff again. Goodness me. Years later, Steve reaches adulthood and wanders the vast wilderness with his dog. It turns out he rolled into a gully and various rodents raised him. Damn, that same crazy survival story. He walks, drives, and sometimes parties with the wild animals during his journey. He does all of that in the hopes of finding the one that stole his life. Throughout his journey, assassins continuously attack Steve. Unfortunately for his enemies, Steve's power keeps growing the more he fights. Through countless battles, he becomes adept at fighting. I know I came here for some kung fu action, but why do I feel like I'm about to get scarred for life again? Sometime later, Steve encounters a group of bandits planning to take his life. After a series of stare-downs, a nip shot, and a girl in a bikini, the battle begins. Numbers don't pose any danger to Steve as he expertly dismantles the bandits. When the bandits take out their weapons, Steve picks up a pair of goofers and uses them as a nunchuck. Oh no, don't worry. No animals get hurt while filming this movie. I guess. Eventually, he kills the last remaining bandits by taking out their eyeballs. While doing his victory cry, Steve accidentally pops an artery and faints. A few days later, Steve arrives at Master Tang's school. He talks to Tang about his problem and asks him for help. Tang refuses at first, but after Steve implores him, he changes his mind. He tells Steve about Master Payne and the evil council that protects him. Tang then says that Steve is the chosen one, and a man with a squeaky shoes immediately objects. The man's name is Wimp Lo, and he wants to be the chosen one. Annoyed, Master Tang tells Wimp Lo to sit down and apologizes to Steve. He then explains that Wimp Lo is an idiot, and he purposely trained him wrong as a joke. Tang then says that the chosen one will bear the mark of infinite wisdom. After hearing this, Steve puts out his tongue and reveals the creature inside it. What in God's name is that thing? Steve tells Tang that it's the reason why he's getting pursued and its name is Tonguey. Master Tang immediately questions his decision-making in life. Eventually, the sickly Tang decides to let Steve train in his school until he learns the whereabouts of Master Payne. He then introduces him to Ling and says she'll help him. While Tang says that Ling is shy, she immediately flashes Steve in front of everyone. Can we roll that clip again in slow-mo? No? Come on. One more time? Huh? Okay, moving on. After some time, Master Payne arrives in town and the mayor welcomes him. Meanwhile, Ling tells Wimp Lo to be careful on his journey because he thinks losing is winning. Wimp Lo ignores her warning and kisses her before leaving to defeat the Chosen One. Back at the school, Steve begins his training and excels at it. He even does no-handed push-ups by using his breath. Wow. I'll have some of whatever this man is smoking. Eventually, the rest of the students warm up to Steve and his friend. One day, Wimp Lo decides to challenge Steve to a duel. They go to a secluded temple nearby and begin fighting. Of course, Wimp Lo is no match. He doesn't realize it at all. Wimp Lo still fails even after using his nuts to your face secret move. Ling arrives to stop them from fighting, and Wimp Lo declares he wins because he's the one bleeding. Ling's companion then says that Master Tang is in town, so an angry Steve rushes back to town. Later in town, Master Tang demonstrates his brick wall powers. Steve and his dog are in disbelief of Master Tang's capabilities. While having lunch later, Master Tang declares he will now be called Betty. What a scary name! Steve tries picking a fight with him, but it doesn't happen because it's Betty's nap time. Biatch. Further in the day, Steve tries imitating what Master Tang did earlier. He gets destroyed, and his student friends leave him unconscious on the ground. When he wakes up later at night, Steve meets a mysterious woman with one melon. Whoa, it looks like someone ran out of money for another implant. The woman introduces herself as Wu and tells Steve he's not ready to fight Betty. Realizing that Steve doesn't believe her, Wu decides to test his skills. A few karate chops and some weird tongue jousting later, Wu notices Tonguey. She tells Steve to trust in the power of the tongue. Solid advice. She then warns him to avoid the middle because Betty's protector Moon Yu is there. She then leaves after saying they'll meet many more times in the sequel. While confused with everything he learned, Steve recalls Wu's choker. He then remembers that his mother wore this same ornament as a necklace. Hold up, did this guy Tang Kung Fu's mother? Unwilling to deal with the thought, Steve turns to his dog. The next day, Master Tang decides to kick Betty's bum. Unfortunately, before the battle begins, Tang starts coughing badly. Yo, they should have this man tested for COVID. While jamming to MC Hammer, Betty fights and forces Tang to retreat. Later, Ling tries to stop Steve from challenging Betty. She believes he's not ready and refuses to reveal Betty's location. Steve implores her to reconsider, so she changes her mind and tells him, "Is that some Jedi mind trick or something? I should try that sometime." Steve leaves to find Betty and, despite Wu's warning, eventually ends up in the middle. Steve meets Moon Yu and she's a Kung Fu cow. A fierce battle ensues and it seems that cow has the upper hand. After a few cow chops, other bites, and milk bullets later, Steve beats Moon Yu by milking her dry. Well, I guess we know where most of the film's budget went. With Moon Yu defeated, Steve now faces Betty in a nearby waterfall. Ling's father arrives to stop the fight, but he fails. Steve then learns a valuable lesson about Betty's iron claw weapon. They hurt like crap. Steve and Ling's father survive after getting washed away by the water current. They return to Master Tang's school to regroup and heal up. Unfortunately, Ling's father doesn't make it because Tang kept massaging his boob wound. What's wrong with Tang? That night, Steve apologizes to Ling about her father's death. For some twisted reason, Ling gets horny instead of sad. She exposes herself to Steve but seems indecisive about pushing through. Eventually, she settles with hugging him instead. Shame. Since Ling practically blue-balled him, Steve wanders the wilderness that night. While walking, the sky lights up and Mushufasa appears. It seems he's mistaken Steve for Simba. Mushufasa gives some vague advice, leaving him even more confused. What a useless spirit animal. The next day, Betty learns that the Chosen One is still alive and goes on a manhunt for him. He uses Ling as a bait to set up a trap for Steve. Later, Betty gives Master Tang, Ling, Wimp Lo, and the dog severe wounds during an ambush. Steve gets trapped but manages to escape and save his friends, except for Wimp Lo, because he's too weak to live. Unwilling to let the tragedy happen again, Steve trains hard to defeat Betty. It seems Betty's protective pyramid caps are the source of his power. After realizing this, Steve tries to figure out a way to remove them. Steve fails several times and becomes frustrated. Ling helps him out by burning his hands and making them better for gripping the pyramid caps. It works, and Steve now is ready for the showdown with Betty. That night, the evil council summons Betty. They inform him that Steve is still alive and tell him to finish the job. Feeling less confident, Betty asks the council for help, and they oblige. In the morning, Steve goes to a local store and buys some nuts. Dang, that's a lot of nuts. He then uses them to capture a squirrel for his secret plan. Later that day, he fights Betty in another isolated temple. Betty uses his iron claws and Steve opens with his shirt ripper technique. The fighting intensifies and moves to aerial combat. The dog distracts Betty with his leg humping technique. Steve takes advantage of the opening and tries removing Betty's pyramid caps. He fails to remove them, but he still knocks Betty down. Unfortunately, all hell breaks loose when Betty's backup arrives from the skies. It turns out that the evil council is a group of pyramid-riding aliens and French. Okay. They start powering up Betty, and he reveals the council's bases in France. He adds that they will soon rise to dominate the whole world. Steve tries fighting back, but Betty is now too strong for him. He gets hit by Betty's paralyzer and loses control of both his arms. Unable to defend himself because of his noodle arms, Steve eats a barrage of punches from Betty. He falls to the ground and Betty starts celebrating while showing him his old baby shoes. Steve recalls everything that happened to him the night he lost his family. Then Mushufaza appears and tells Steve to open his mouth. He follows the advice, and Tonguey launches an attack at the evil council ship. After losing one of their ships, the evil council retreats and leaves Betty behind. Steve then powers up and launches an attack on the distracted Betty's pyramid caps. Betty fights back with a palm strike to the chest and sends Steve flying. Suddenly, Betty's chest starts squirting blood and he tries to laugh. It seems Steve successfully removed his pyramid caps after all. He then learned that Steve used the squirrel earlier to block Betty's deadly palm strike. Steve thanks the squirrel for his protection and gives him nuts for compensation. Again, no animals got hurt during this film. Ling arrives to congratulate Steve for the victory by flashing her melons, of course. They hug and Steve tells her that there is nothing to worry about anymore. Unfortunately, Steve might be jumping the gun here. We then get a glimpse of what will happen in the future. The evil council will mobilize their France base and begin world domination. We also see thousands of soldiers rushing towards Steve. He also gets captured and tortured by an old kung fu master. Ling somehow learns to fly, and the movie ends with Steve counting the countless enemies he's about to face. It looks like there's supposed to be a part 2, but it's safe to say the idea got scratched. Well, until next time.
Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel.